So I'm Chris McNulty, Senior Product Manager for SharePoint and OneDrive at Microsoft in Redmond. Just a very little bit of background about me. I like to describe myself as a recovering MVP. I spent years and years, I've been working with SharePoint going back to the year 2000. I spent my first 10 years working with SharePoint running a mid-range consulting firm in the northeast of the US, dealing with systems integration around SharePoint and SQL and BI and Project Server and all of that information worker goodness. About 6 years ago, I jumped over to what was then Quest Software as their general manager and chief technology officer, which rapidly became part of Dell. And after a couple of years with them, becoming an MVP, was finally recruited in 2 years ago to join Microsoft. So I focus on a number of areas. I've been speaking and writing and blogging about SharePoint for most of my career, and so it's wonderful to come in here and talk about what we're doing on the server platform for 2016 and beyond. I really also appreciate all of your die-hard commitment to being here. Like as a kid, didn't throw my clever picture of this into the deck because they standardized the decks, but I used to always watch the Winter Olympics. How many of you have ever seen the Winter Olympics? Do you remember what the last event of the Winter Olympics is every year? Is the men's 30K biathlon. And they always show, like, when I was a kid, Jim McKay, or now it's Bob Costas, and all the happy athletes are converging from the Olympic Village in the closing ceremonies. The party is underway. And meanwhile, there's like 150 desperate men with guns on their backs still slogging it out through 30K of the snow. So you folks are the true Olympians to be sticking it out to the last session of the day here. We really appreciate your perseverance with that. So today we're going to talk high-level overview of where we are with SharePoint Server 2016, feature packs and hybrid. I want to hopefully come here and dispel some notions that Microsoft does not know that server still exists. Obviously, if you're coming to this session, you're still running SharePoint Server. The way that we do talk about the product sometimes, you would be forgiven if you thought that we were down to a die-hard band of 12 renegades, fully surrounded, guarding the last known SharePoint server in the world. And we actually know that it's fundamentally different than that there are millions and millions of SharePoint farms around the world running with 2016 with our vision of the way that we're bringing things forward for the cloud, hopefully being able to stitch together and also advance the cause of that on-premises usage in as seamless a manner as possible for users on premises and in the cloud. So starting by looking at where we are with SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2016 was officially released 10 months ago. During the roll-up from SharePoint 2013 to 2016, there was an awful lot of discussion that was out there in the world, like, is there going to be another release? Is there going to be another release? And we made the announcements in March, and in conjunction with our May 4th Future of SharePoint event in San Francisco last year, we announced the general availability of SharePoint 2016. SharePoint 2016, is there going to be a next version? Absolutely. The planning is already well underway. We are going to continue to release versions of server so long as there is a market for it. And so long as folks still want it, we're going to continue to keep releasing it. Our goal is, now that we've converged the code bases between on-premises and the cloud, to keep them as closely aligned as possible moving forward. But we recognize there are some fundamentally different workloads that can make more sense with the on-premises license than they do with the cloud. So at the core of what we're doing for SharePoint 2016, it's probably worth going a little bit back in time to how modern Office 365 was born. Office 365 is not Microsoft's first cloud-based service. There were hosted versions of SharePoint available from Microsoft well back into the last decade. Then there was a capability for a while called BPOS-D for dedicated and BPOS-S for shared, all different ways that you could start approaching SharePoint. When we made the decision to release SharePoint Online as part of Office 365, what we basically did was we took the code that was SharePoint 2013 and lifted it into the cloud. And that became the core basis for how SharePoint Online works. And we have continued over the intervening 4 years to, in a mobile-first, cloud-first world, make releases to the cloud first. Because one thing that we recognize is in the cloud, we can be much more focused on continuous release. For on-premises, asking you to go through an upgrade cycle every 3 months would be really hard, especially when we still have requirements for things like database attach, saying that you're going to build a new farm in the new platform and just move your databases over to it. That is a disruptive behavior. It is time-consuming. It is also an annuity program for consultants. So any of you who are consultants in the world, we recognize that on-premises migration still needs to get simpler and better so that we can focus value on the actual transformation and the re-architecture and being able to do all of this IT goodness to actually add value to what people are doing in their day. So 2013 became Office 365 when it was time for us to formulate the server release. What originally was release candidate 0 was actually snapped off from the main line of code in late 2015. We removed a couple of hooks for things that don't make sense because they're not on-premises workloads, things like Office 365 Video and Delve. Added back in things that are pure on-premises workloads, things like Performance Point, things like support for full trust code, and that becomes a basis for SharePoint Server 2016. But SharePoint shifted a lot in the years between when Office 365 was born and where it is today. And so a lot of what we've been able to do is take advantage of the inherent learning Microsoft has about how SharePoint performs at scale. It's appropriate, if someone who lives in Seattle and comes to this town, which now actually is Boeing's headquarters, I've described for years SharePoint was like, Microsoft was selling airplanes. And we sold them to you, and only in the last few years did we actually ever try to run an airline with the stuff that we built. And the truth is, we weren't even shipping to you a finished airplane. We were shipping you a partially finished airplane with a pile of parts and letting you reassemble it into the different ways you wanted to build SharePoint. We learned more about how SharePoint performs at scale in our first month of running Office 365 than in our first 10 years of running it. So many of those learnings about does it make sense to install all of SharePoint on all of the servers in the farm no longer makes sense in the cloud. And the cloud, there's no great mystery to how we run it. Our cloud Office 365 services are typically composed of units of multiple virtual servers, highly dense, anywhere between 30 and 60 servers in one of those units, supporting as many tenancies as it makes sense to from a performance perspective, usually several dozen tenants inside of each virtual farm. And every 2 to 4 weeks, we take the environment that you're running on and move you to a completely different set of servers, all without your knowing it. So we've been getting very good at understanding the best ways to architect a farm, how to run things at scale, what's the key telemetry. Most of that is baked into the infrastructure that we have. We recognize also that information moves between cloud and on-premises. Having a unified approach to compliance is essential, as well as being able to take advantage of what we talk about as experiences, making sure that the user interface stays as closely aligned between on-premises and cloud as possible. So many of the user interface advancements that we made in the first 3 years of SPO, those you get as just table stakes inside of SharePoint on-premises now. So at the core of it, being able to deal with scale. When Office 365 originally shipped, SharePoint site collections in the cloud were smaller than what we were able to do online. We now know the best practices that are out there, allowing us to support nearly limitless site collections in the cloud, and being able to extend that same learning so that those classic 200 gigabyte limits for on-premises are a thing of the past. Being able to get the best use of your infrastructure so that you can make sure the servers that you are using are highly utilized and appropriate. And finally, having flexibility into how you compose the services. We recognize that it doesn't make sense for every server to try to play every role. We want to adapt the physical infrastructure to the demands that we want to place on it. So when we talk about cloud-inspired infrastructure, forgive the marketing gobbledygook here, a couple of the key capabilities that are worth paying attention to. Being able, first and foremost, at search, being able to have up to 500 million items in the search scope. Also, understanding that if you architect a SharePoint server farm appropriately, you can patch it with zero downtime, which is a capability that we obviously have to maintain in the service if we want to apply server-side patching to what we're running in our data centers. Zero downtime patching is no magic voodoo. In case you were thinking that what it means is that I can just open up a binary, point it towards a 15-server farm, click OK, and my new public update's applied. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about in this is the ability of SharePoint to be more resilient across multiple versions. So essentially, zero downtime patching is support for having pairs of servers in role. And what I am able to do now is take a web front-end server, drop it out of rotation, patch it, put it back in, and even though I'll have different schema numbers across the two members, SharePoint will allow the farm to function while I then go in and jump to the other side of the pair, patch it, and bring it back on. So you still have to do a stepwise application of patches to everything that's out there, along with ultimately being able to update content databases. But again, the content databases can be up, available, and even readable during the time of patching. Min-role, I've alluded to, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. We're beyond the days of saying when I install SharePoint that I want to install everything everywhere. When I install SharePoint now, we still support a single server build if you insist. Not really recommended for scalable production, but you can do it for demo and test. But we ask you to specify, is this going to be a web front-end server, or is this going to be an application server, or a search server, or a cache server? And being able to only install the services that are appropriate to each of those roles. And we can monitor what we expect for the operating characteristics of a web front-end server. And if we see services disappear that are essential to that, automatically reactivate them to provide better resiliency. And also being able to be cloud connected. One of the core things that Office 365 has taught us is how we can flight. When we talk about, when I talk to audiences about how we turn things on in the cloud, you'll hear us talk about flights, which is really just a praxis by using content delivery networks to turn on new capabilities across multiple farms all at the same time. That core flighting engine, because 2016 is now derived from the cloud, is there as well. So it means, A, administratively, we can structure it so that we can start to pre-position code and solutions and services and public updates, and when all the rest of the things are ready, through PowerShell or a simple activation, those capabilities instantly come on without installation. It also means, at its core, we have a philosophy, and we'll talk more about this in hybrid, about certain workloads. There are some things, like a team site or a document library, where I can put them in the cloud or on premises with equal facility. There are other capabilities, like Delve, like Office 365 Video, that really can't run on premises. We get requests still for people who are like, when is Yammer Server going to be released? And the answer is never. The same thing with Delve, the same thing with Office 365 Video. And I say that a little cheekily, never say never. If there is sufficient user demand in an actual market, we of course would look at that. But the operating characteristics to be able to run Microsoft Graph and Delve on premises would be considerable. If you have 1,000 spare cores of burstable activity that you can throw in behind the scenes, so that they're sitting around idle, but if it's suddenly time to do a whole bunch of machine learning processing, having those dozens of servers burstable for capacity, those are Azure capabilities that we're leveraging across Office 365, and you would need that. Those really don't work as on-premises workloads. So our goal is, whenever possible, if we can give you something on-premises, we will. And if we haven't put it there yet, to try to bundle it up into a feature pack. And if we can't put it in a feature pack, our goal is to try to stream it to you and make the user experience of it as seamless as possible with hybrid technology. So Office 365 has taught SharePoint on premises these three things. First and foremost, make sure that the user interface is touch responsive. So understanding and being responsive about seeing the device someone is running on, and being able to give screen elements that are appropriate if someone is accessing it on a tablet or a mobile device. We mentioned the hybrid implementation, and also being able to take advantage of the core capabilities that we have about being document-centric for how people collaborate. SharePoint has lots of workloads, always has, always will, but first and foremost among those is being able to get teams of people to work on documents. And we hope that we've landed that for you appropriately. Some of the stuff that's kind of below the waterline is, may feel a little bit, it's certainly not user-facing, but performance capabilities for page load are essential, because to get that user confidence that lets them feel like it's a worthwhile place for them to do collaboration, we want to make sure that people are getting into their information as quickly as possible. We've learned an awful lot as to the best ways that people want to actually share content. SharePoint 2013 was the first place we actually introduced share as an action. What's the rush after 13 years to finally make it easy for people to share inside of SharePoint? But being able to extend that along with being able to make sure that the interface is touch-friendly. And lastly, making sure that from a development perspective, we're making it as easy as possible for you to stitch into things like the Office Backstage or the File tab, along with laying down the foundation, the foundational elements for us to be able to support new developer paradigms like the SharePoint framework. This is not a dev-centric session, but we've already done the foundational work to allow you to be able to write one set of code, and when we release framework in a future feature pack, being able to run that code uniformly between the cloud as well as on premises. Patterns of work definitely have changed, and one of the biggest constraints on the way people like to work has to do with compliance. As users are moving between cloud and on-premises information stores, our need to wrap them in consistent and universal approaches to things like information management policies or document deletion policies, things that we introduced first into Office 365, we've brought into the on-premises environment so that you can define universal policies as to what happens when someone wants to delete a document. As simple as that, as well as more fine-grained access controls. We'll take a look at some of those things here in demonstration momentarily. So SharePoint 2016, by being derived from the cloud, has the same core telemetry engine. So when we look at this momentarily, there is a service inside SharePoint called SharePoint Insights. SharePoint Insights allows me to look at and inspect all of the audit log activities on premises and stage it up into Office 365. And why do I put it in Office 365? Because if I'm running any kind of hybrid service, or even if I'm not, I have advanced reporting and analysis capabilities in the cloud that I'm able to merge that. So if I want to create a unified view of what a user did between on-premises and the cloud, I now have the ability to do that from compliance. We have extended our cloud-based sensitive information discovery into on-premises. So being able to leverage through eDiscovery our tests for dozens of sensitive information types, things like the fingerprints that indicate we have a credit card number, or a UK driver's license, or whatever the sensitive information rules that you are trying to control, we have those available to you right now. And although it's a more advanced topic, SharePoint 2016 can participate in key sharing with Azure Rights Management Services so that I can have one unified key and access control system being able to use to encrypt files as users are downloading them from the cloud and from on-premises to locally owned device. We talked a little bit about what we're doing with DLP and document hold. So all of those, we're continuing to invest and bring forward capabilities for on-premises. On-premises is still unique in its capabilities for being able to support full trust code, or BI tooling like Performance Point, or being able to be tightly coupled to SQL Server reporting services. These line of business level integrations are one of the things that justifies those workloads. But cloud is not a fad. And so it's important to understand what that's really going to mean for your strategy moving forward. So as we think about this, how are we able to bring things to you on premises? One is we put them in a box, we ship them to you, we call it server. The second is we think that it's a bad practice to let your on-premises implementation, which right now is already, how many of you are already running 2016? How many are still on 2013 or an older version? Okay. So if you're on a 2013 or an older version, you're already 5 years behind the cloud. If you're on 2016 today, you may be 2 years behind unless you've deployed Feature Pack 1, in which case you're only a few months behind. So the feature packs are our way of making sure that you don't have to wait for the next major version to get things in place. One of the things I learned when I joined Microsoft is, the upgrade process can be burdensome, right? Anyone remember the older versions of SharePoint when we had something called in-place upgrade? Yep. How many? Anyone here? I will pay $1 to someone who can prove that they were consistently successful with in-place upgrade. Right? Sorry? Yeah, if you go out of the box, you put no content into a 2007 environment, you do an in-place upgrade, it may work 4 times out of 5. But that's not feedback. You get to Microsoft and hey, do you know about that? Of course they know about it. They've been working on it. The 2013 to 2016 upgrade process, there was a lot of engineering attention paid to supporting 2 scenarios. One is being able to skip a version to go straight from 2010 to 2016, and the other is to bring back in-place upgrade. The skip a version upgrade cycle, they never got better than 70 to 80% reliability, so we decided not to ship that. But we're highly confident that if you're on 2013, and when we ship SharePoint V Next, if you haven't gone to 2016, we're very confident that we don't see another infrastructure change like distributed cache getting in the way of that upgrade cycle. That said, the whole purpose there is to talk about feature packs. Feature packs are our way to make sure that we can release things to you quickly in as non-disruptive a path as possible, using the public update methodology, and then being able to use activations to turn things on. Organizations, by the way, who participate in our tests, in our TAP program for things like Feature Pack 1, are able to take advantage of the infrastructure we have from the cloud, and that we can have multiple versions of SharePoint internally defined and available for different user experiences, and it's really a matter of using script to flight different functions on or off to put SharePoint into different modes, so that the actual release becomes a switch flip instead of a big binary installation process. And last, of course, is hybrid. If you have a workload that you stitched into on-premises, like, for example, Office 365 Video, we want that experience to be seamless so that as we make updates to Video, as we make updates to Yammer or to Delve or to OneDrive, those are things which people are going to get automatically because their experience, although they think it may be running on premises, is actually being served from the cloud. So I mentioned before kind of our history with converging the code base. There were versions of SharePoint Online back in the past, which were kind of one-off. In the 2013 timeframe, we merged all the code bases so that moving forward, we had one way to make sure that we were rolling out advances so that there wasn't this giant testing gap that we needed to use every time we wanted to put something new out moving forward. What we get from Office 365, the learnings that we have, they accrue to you. There is a bit of marketing overzealous hype that says SharePoint 2016 is the most tested version of SharePoint in history. And that's true from a certain point of view. It's as tested as any other version. The reason why we say that is because it is based on this SharePoint Online code stream. We have the ability to know that we tried this with document libraries, it didn't work. We can do continual patching in the cloud until we get to something with a 0 defect rate. So when you look at the tens of millions of people who have been using that code base for the last year, 2, 3 years, that is a much bigger pool of testers, if you will. You know, I wouldn't say we're experimenting on the cloud users first, but we do gain the benefit of their usage about what works before we bring something into on-premises that requires a full server build. So min role is a part of the architecture. If you're a solutions architect or if you need to design or engineer the infrastructure for SharePoint, when we look at all of the different things that SharePoint can do, we categorize them on the server side between things which are driven from a user taking an action. So being able to serve up a web page or a document library to people, or being able to trigger a sync process, those are user-driven things. Then there's a whole bunch of things which we think of as robot tasks. Things like the timer service, which are not happening because a user did something, but because it's time to go do an automated process. Then we have things that aren't even time-bound, but are just steady stream, like caching. And lastly, search. All of this is encapsulated inside of something we call min role. So within min role, when I install as a server, I decide, is this going to be a web front-end server, or an app server, or a cache server, or a search server? Now, I have a different slide I use with some audiences where I ask people, I promise no tricky math. But if I have a web server and an app server and a cache server and a search server, and let's not forget somewhere down here behind the curtain is my SQL server. Now, if I want to have a fully redundant SharePoint 2016 environment, how many servers do I need? Not 3. No, not 3. Not 1. I heard someone say it back here. Yes. Not 4. 10. Actually, technically 11, because if you think about it for SQL, I probably have a witness server on my cluster. But yeah, 10 is really the number we want to get at. That's the way that we architect at scale in the cloud, and that's an architecture that makes a ton of sense if you have 50,000 users on premises. We've also heard that it doesn't make a lot of sense if people are running smaller footprints. If you have 100 users, deploying a 10-server farm for SharePoint probably is overkill. So we have introduced the ability for you to collapse these roles with Feature Pack 2. So you can collapse cache and web front end. You can collapse search and app, kind of the way that we would have been doing things before. So you have a lot more flexibility with Feature Pack 1 and how these roles get mixed and matched. We talked before about zero downtime patching. I'm not going to belabor the point here, but because the servers have smaller binary footprints, the time involved in patching each one is also reduced. And by deploying servers in pairs and making them tolerant of version number gaps, I can make sure that each one of those layers is left up continuously running throughout the process. The engineering trick on the back end is eventually you do have to update database schemas. And the way that what zero downtime patching means is that during the time that that database is itself being re-architected, the database is cached in read-only mode. So new tables are being set up in the background and stuff's getting copied over to them. So that, technically speaking, during the time that you're patching that's hitting the database, SharePoint is still there serving content. People may not be able to update the documents in there, so I would still recommend that patching happen during times of comparatively low activity, but you don't need to chase everyone out of the system for a weekend to apply a service pack anymore, or a public update. So feature packs, as I mentioned before, are the way that we have of being able to get stuff in your user's hand or in your admin's hand without waiting for the next major release. How many of you have operated under a CIO, or maybe the CIO, where she or he has said, we're not going to roll this out until Feature Pack 1 comes out? Hey, who's heard that rule before? Okay. I need to make sure people know that this whole older regime that we had, major release every 3 years, and service pack every year to year and a half, and an update every 2 months is not the way we're doing things anymore. We'll do major releases every 3 years. That's the same, 2 to 3 approximately. And we've moved to a monthly cycle on our public updates, so that's better. There is never going to be a Service Pack 1 for SharePoint 2016. There will be no SP1. Feature Pack 1 is already out. Feature Pack 2 is already out. We see feature packs as being the way that we're going to roll forward new capabilities. The public updates is where we have bug fixes, stability improvements, and so forth in the accumulation over time. But the one big bang of here's Feature Pack 1, it has all the bug fixes, it has all the patches, it has new features, that big bang approach we think doesn't really match the cloud cadence. So we want to make sure that as we are bringing new things out in the cloud, even things that came out after the original release of 2016, things, again, like updates to OneDrive, things like new hybrid capabilities, such as auditing, that we have a means of stitching that up using Feature Pack 1. So what's in Feature Pack 1? Feature Pack 1 was announced at Ignite last year and was rolled out last November for users. And I will show you this in demo here momentarily. We took advantage of the modern responsive design that's graphically rich of OneDrive for Business in the cloud and extended it to your MySite OneDrive for Business on premises. So we'll talk about that in a moment, as well as support for custom tiles. So making sure that in older versions of SharePoint that we didn't have that waffle to launch applications. The cloud has it. We added it to 2016. We're also adding it to 2013. It's probably worth knowing, and we'll talk about this more in hybrid, that we see feature packs are unique to 2016. But hybrid is a capability we want to extend to all, 2013 as well as 2016 combined. From an IT perspective, we made changes to MinRole. We've added some new hybrid capabilities around classification as well as reporting services, and support for being able to trigger audits, not just on what users are doing, but on what admins are doing inside of Central Admin. And lastly, some new APIs opened up for OneDrive. So, as I mentioned before, using the cloud as our first case, we're able to bring OneDrive for Business's user experience into on-premises as a second case. So being able to bring in responsive design, add things on premises that you may have seen in cloud capabilities like modern document libraries. So OneDrive for Business on premises, we have the information pane. We have the command bar with capabilities for move and copy, rename files in place, all designed to look beautiful, be graphically rich, be highly performing, and take advantage of responsive design for people who are looking at this on different form factor devices beyond just a browser. The custom tile capability is being able to use a simple UI that lets you go in and build custom tiles. And if you are running 2016, this is a capability for you. It's also extensible, because this is a hybrid workload, into 2013. So by being able to provide users a similar tile experience, they're able to, from on-premises, move to a custom workload, like let's say OneDrive for Business, if that happens to be served from the cloud, or other custom tiles that I want to add to that. I may have a custom cloud service that lives outside of Office 365, being able to make sure I have one unified way that people can get to it, so they don't have to remember two different, completely different web experiences for on-premises as well as for cloud. So for MinRole, originally the installation, as you see here, at the time of installation, we ask you, is this a front-end, app, cache, or search server? With Feature Pack 1, we now have this second box here that lets me also say front-end with cache or app with server. And you can mix and match across all those capabilities so long as you check one from every box. So you could put a separate front-end, a separate cache server, and a combined app and search server if you want, based on your workloads. We want to give you more flexibility because we did hear the feedback loud and clear over the past few months that 10 servers is an awful lot for a small environment. So hybrid auditing is on, and it's available right now. And we'll take a look at some of the output of that momentarily. It allows me to take user logs from on-premises and merge them with user activity logs in the cloud into our online services. So you have one place to go to report on what users are doing, being able to search across all of those user behaviors that are out there. And as time permits, we may take a deeper look into that. Closely related with Feature Pack 1 is hybrid taxonomy. So as information and user navigation can move between cloud and on-premises, we know that we need to offer you a unified way to be able to deal with my content that lives on-premises and have a unified way of classifying it that's shared with Office 365. So hybrid taxonomy is a service and a set of tools that allow me to push a term set up into the cloud to become the master. And in hybrid taxonomy, those managed metadata service term sets and tags, I can define them in the cloud as master and run timer service jobs on premises to synchronize them on a frequent basis, typically once an hour. So I have one set of classifications that I can use for information regardless of where I want to post it in my extended architecture. And you're not forced to keep everything through there. You can have some cloud-only term sets. You can have some on-premises-only term sets. But this gives you the flexibility to have a unified classification schema between all of that. Administrative actions logging. Gosh, this does not play well on a large screen. But on premises, you now have the ability to step in and take a look at anything someone is doing inside of Central Admin and be able to have those be triggered to an audit log as well. And those audit logs, again, when merged into hybrid taxonomy, give you the ability to pick them up into the cloud. So that's we've talked through Feature Pack 1. In terms of what you're planning, SharePoint 2016 was announced 10 months ago, was snapped off 10 months ago, but went to GA last May. We went through multiple monthly public updates before announcing Feature Pack 1 and releasing it at the start of November. We will continue to do that. Right now, it is tracking toward a little more than 6 months from now. Feature Pack 2 should come out. We can't and won't tell you everything that's in Feature Pack 2 until about a month before, because we don't want people, there's a lot of reasons for that, but we also don't want to disappoint people in case there's something that we think we can put in a feature pack and we can't. But it's our core philosophy that every innovation that we put into the cloud, if we can put it into a feature pack without forcing you to go through a full upgrade cycle, we want to do that. So this is what to expect moving forward. And once again, as you'll note, there is no service pack that's coming. So yada, 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 always up to date, always the most secure current version. I can't just keep talking off of the slides. I'm going to have to show you something here momentarily. before we get on and talk about Fast Track. I think it probably makes some sense here for me to kind of show you some of these core capabilities that we have in what a hybrid topology for SharePoint 2016 looks like. Okay, so in this environment, SharePoint.odsp.com.co that you see up here, that is my on-premises environment. This is a 8-server farm that is running SharePoint 2016 Feature Pack 1. Along, you can see with all of our SharePoint 2016 collaboration innovations. We once upon a time, we gave you a picture of 2 people, and then we gave you a picture of 3 people, and we can extend the Fibonacci ratio by now giving you 5 tiles, because that's how we expand collaboration, by throwing more stuff at you in the home screen. But this is my on-premises environment. And so you'll see right here, if I click up on the left, I now have a waffle. And that waffle I can use to direct me to services that may be on premises or in the cloud. So I can jump, for example, to Delve or Video. And from a user perspective, if they're used to connecting to your on-premises server, this gives them a nearly seamless way to be able to pick up a workload that I may have redirected, like OneDrive, and direct them to be able to pick that up directly from the cloud. So if I come here, the user experience is now when I click on this, when it finishes resolving, it's going to bring me to my OneDrive. My OneDrive, in this case, logged in as Garth, happens to be inside of Office 365. If that is a workload, and it is a good candidate for many organizations, to move your personal OneDrives up into Office 365 to gain the ease of access for multiple devices and endpoints around the world, rather than having to tunnel all of those iPhones and iPads back in through firewalls or VPNs and what have you to get back to where that content lives and gets synced from. So that's an example of what a hybrid workload looks like. Here I am. Sorry, let's get back. Also on this page, one of the things you see here is this screen. Let me just refresh this. I think I just logged in. So right here, if I click on this, and I promised my AV pals in the back that I wouldn't insist on audio, and so I don't expect you to be able to see this. But on premises, when I click this embedded video, what's going to see, based upon conference available bandwidth here, come on, play. Could be. Yeah, I tend to use, by the way, full disclosure, I use Edge for almost everything, except for demos. Because for demos, there's this one capability inside Chrome, which if you ever, by the way, quick browser tip, that lets you set up multiple identities. So rather than opening up in private or incognito windows and setting logins, it'll remember separate sets of cache credentials. So as I move from one tenant to another, to another different roles, I can maintain different login sets here. That's why I use Chrome. That's a capability I wish we had in Edge. Don't have it yet, but that's what I'm doing here. So this very well may be a video issue. I wonder what's going to happen. If I jump over in here and look at Office 365 video, the video that I've got here is actually stored inside of the cloud. So I'm taking advantage of Azure Streaming and Azure Storage and not clogging down my local CPU and my local storage with a heavy workload like video. But being able to do that, this is not rocket science. I can take a single Office 365 video. Let's go find the channel that's out here. And if this plays directly from the cloud, I'll be surprised. But essentially, all I need to do is go into where I have that video, grab the embed code, and then edit my on-premises page to be able to pick that file up here. It's one of the simpler ways that I can do it. But the other thing that's really worth noting is my ability to be able to look at all of my information architecture, regardless, with the sites that I follow and the information I'm working with, regardless of where it lives, through the SharePoint homepage experience. Something we released last May as part of SharePoint Online. Thanks to Cloud Hybrid Search, I'm able to come here and look for content regardless of where it lives. So if I come in here and look for something like the word SharePoint, I'm going to see a result set, and what you're going to start to see, it may not be apparent, but if I click here, I'm going to see lists of sites. So here's a site that lives online. This next site happens to live on premises. So all the search returns, all the search ranking will be calculated on a combined set of search indexes. All of these hybrid capabilities, except for search, but all these hybrid capabilities can be turned on using a simple wizard that's available inside the Office 365 Admin Center. So I can look at all of my sites, I can look at all of my content, and we've made all of this modern just to kind of, I'm going to jump to the classic page only because it's a little easier. It chews up a little more screen real estate to show you the URL for each of these files. So I can see, again, with this search result, it is blending information that's coming from online as well as from the cloud. Here's a page from on-premises. Here's a team site notebook that lives on the cloud. I've obviously chosen a word which is pretty commonly used throughout a SharePoint demo information architecture to make sure I have a lot of stuff coming back at me. But all this information can come back to me from search without the user having to remember to run 2 different searches. And also from that SharePoint homepage experience, being able to look at that master list based on my usage patterns. And again, my usage patterns, since this is a demo environment, are sporadic. Seeing what activity is out there, what's been going on recently, along with links that are featured to me, being able to provide one common information navigation and one common place to do discovery of information, regardless of where that information lives on premises or in the cloud. So I'm watching my clock. Full disclosure, I'm flying back to Boston after this. I have a flight at 6:30. So if I actually end a little bit early, I can take Q&A at 4:30 on the dot. I will make like Cinderella and leave my shoes behind. So I want to make sure we reserve a little bit of time for Q&A before that has to happen, because I don't want to have to leave mid-sentence. The gift of the Irish, I can never shut up, but I'll just save time and stop right now. So there's lots of survey data. There's some stuff I worked on 2 years ago. There's the stuff Microsoft Research itself has pulled out in the last year. We know that most enterprises are already using or well on the road to the cloud. And the case studies like the one my friend Dan presented up here yesterday about having companies like Delta Airlines or Hershey's moving hundreds of thousands of users to the cloud really, we think, validates our excitement about what we've been able to do there. That said, one of the things we've been observing is that people's approach to on-premises is not to replace it, but to extend it with the cloud. So those on-premises workloads, those highly customized, highly branded, full trust environments, we recognize that they can be difficult to move. And in fact, there may not be any valid reason to move those workloads if they work just fine as is. So we want to give you the ability to expand into the cloud, take advantage of those capacity and innovations, and not have to toss the baby out with the bathwater and throw everything else away. We expect most organizations to be using Office 365 substantially, if they aren't already, over the next few years. We also expect, if they're running SharePoint on premises, to continue running that alongside. A survey I did a year and a half ago, we talked to 300 enterprises about their approach to on-premises and asked, if you're running on-premises alongside, do you have a timetable for getting rid of your on-premises servers? And over 3/4 of the organizations expect to continue running on-premises permanently. Hybrid is not a transitional architecture halfway during a migration where I have maximum cost and maximum complexity, but it represents a permanent outcome. You all have choices as to where you consume where you get consumer services as well as cloud services. And I think the new Microsoft, I hope we're realistic about, there are some things you're going to go get from Amazon. You're going to get some from Salesforce. You're going to get some from Google. We may happen to believe we're 2% better than some of our competitors in certain things, but we can't be everything to everyone. And if you have a workload that makes total sense with one of our competitors, we want to integrate with it and make it as easy as possible for you to do both. One of those other workloads is on-premises. We don't want to give you an either-or. We want to empower both choices for you moving forward. So historically, I remember going, how many of you remember the SharePoint conferences? So I remember the SharePoint conference in SPC 2012, where SharePoint 2013 was imminent, and there was a lot of discussion. It was one of the last ones. It was the last one at Mandalay Bay about Office 365 is here. I mean, you can still, I guess, keep running SharePoint on premises, I guess, expecting everyone was going to seamlessly, automatically fly to the cloud. And we've seen this happen, like that people may migrate to the cloud eventually. But we actually think that what works better for more organizations is hybrid. We don't see on-premises as something to turn our back from. It's something that you've embraced. It's something that we embrace. And we recognize that migration is going to take longer, if at all. As I said before, we know you have servers. We're going to continue to be out there. We're going to continue to support them. There will be a next release. There will be a release beyond that, so on and so forth. So long as there is demand for servers, we're going to continue packaging and shipping them up for you, closely aligned with the cloud, but recognizing some of those unique capabilities. 15 minutes to go. So in formulating your approach to what goes into that overall architecture, this is kind of the landscape of capabilities for hybrid. There are workloads at the top level like the app launcher. The app launcher provides a unified way for users to bounce around some of these core capabilities, whether they are things like OneDrive or your core sites and SharePoint experiences or things like Delve. The app launcher sits on top of all of those things. Our approach to hybrid is different than our approach to feature packs. When SharePoint 2016 was still kind of being formulated, I participated in a debate about our hybrid capabilities. We were asking ourselves, should we make hybrid exclusive to 2016? And our answer to that ultimately was no. Because if you are an organization moving to the cloud and you expect there to be a transitional period along the way where you're going to be in a hybrid posture, but we didn't want to force you to arbitrarily upgrade to 2016 as the only way to get hybrid capabilities. So as much as possible, whenever we can, our hybrid capabilities are being backported to 2013 as well as to 2016. So the July 2016 public update for SharePoint 2013 contained the code for the app launcher. So if you're running on-premises 2013, you can participate in hybrid and redirect workloads to OneDrive, to Yammer, to Video, to Delve, and so on and so forth. Somewhere below the waterline, below those apps, is the ability of us to do data integration. So if that top tier is user-facing, what we can do at the bottom level, of all of the hybrid workloads, search is probably the most important. The way that hybrid search works, and again, this is more of an intro topic, but I'll explain it. In a hybrid search topology, your on-premises content never leaves on-premises. It is crawled on-premises. The only thing that we merge is the list of properties with what's in the cloud. Search unlocks an awful lot of other capabilities like Delve, like being able to apply e-discovery according to these things. Then there are other things like classification and auditing, again, which allow us to unify the data streams around all that collaboration. And finally, something so comparatively new, we haven't even included it on the official slide, is our support for hybrid business applications. So new workloads like Power Apps and Flow, and Power BI with gateway services, we're able to bring in information from SharePoint on premises and from OneDrive on premises to participate inside of Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. So we don't want folks to think that those new capabilities for being able to build mobile-friendly applications that I run on any possible device, or those new workflow capabilities, they are not unique to cloud. Through the free gateway services, you can extend those into on-premises environments as well to be able to deploy mobile apps working against data in lists and libraries that live on premises as easily as if they lived inside of the cloud, thanks to Gateway, along with also Power BI. There's a demo, which again, way too many things that we can cram in to 75 minutes here, but one of the demos that I presented at Ignite, something that we built, we take a Power App that begins tied to a SharePoint list that lives in the cloud. We use Flow to collect data and push it into an on-premises SQL data warehouse. From there, we use Power BI to carve it up and then take Power BI reports and deploy them to both on-premises and to SharePoint Online based on where someone needs to consume those. So we want to give you as many possible ways of being able to composite all of these capabilities. Still recognizing there are some things, again, like full trust code, like Performance Point, which are only on premises, things like Power BI and Yammer, which are only in the cloud. We want to make it as invisible as possible to users so they don't have to think about two different experiences, even if we do. So just to kind of recap where we've been and where we're headed, Feature Pack 1 was released late last year. We are continuing to marshal our public updates as we get ready for Feature Pack 2 in another 6 months or so. The feature set, again, is not locked for Feature Pack 2, but anything that you see us innovate on that's come out since Feature Pack 1 is fair game. And it also allows you to consume things on your terms. If you have users who are change averse and you don't want to move the cheese and disrupt their experience with an update, we're not forcing you to deploy a feature pack. If you can continue to run all the public updates and get all the stability and security improvements and take the features on your terms. We control when features get released to the cloud, but on premises, you have that control. And we think that's one of the other important distinctions we have with information out there. So to sum up, SharePoint 2016 represents a major evolution in how we bring cloud technology to you. If SharePoint 2013 was about forcing you into the cloud, I really think SharePoint 2016 is about bringing the cloud down to you. And with feature packs and hybrid being able to keep them more closely aligned with what we're innovating on in the cloud than ever before. So that said, I'll be around for a few minutes. Thank you very much for sticking it out. Have a great day.